today's speaker, Nancy Ulrichs and Trina for reception. If I could please call Ms. Carol Orbanson to the front, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mr. Rob Schlegel for our invocation, please.
I think this is what you get when you don't show up as often as you're supposed to. You know, get drafted for something. If you join me in prayer. Lord, we approach you from many different backgrounds, and we call you many different things. But we all know that you are the supreme creator, and we praise you as our supreme creator. Please forgive us for all of the times that we stray from building your kingdom and instead chase after the allures of the world around us. We thank you so much for Kiwanis and for all the wonderful programs and projects that Kiwanis carries out through our club, through our state, and through the world. We thank you for this food. We ask that you bless this food and those who prepare it, and bless all of us. Amen.
And everybody can be seated. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. In order to encourage participation from some of our former presidents, next week's past President's Day will move to Zoom to replicate last year's format. So again, next week is via Zoom. The new Kiwanis year officially begins October 1st. I am excited. It is, Tom. Yeah, certainly. I'm excited to welcome Laura Holloway, Max Harper, and Jackie Clancy to the club board. I'll pass the gavel to our incoming president, Carol Orbison, and take the lead as foundation board chair. Yay! Thanks to those who have already submitted their payment for dues. We appreciate your prompt payment so we can submit our roster of members to Kiwanis for the upcoming year. We appreciate all of our members, especially those celebrating Kiwanis anniversaries this week. Carol Lathrop, 3 years, Mr. Bob Spinogle, 40 years, and Faye Williams, 34 years. If you'd like to join Nancy Ulrichs, Laura Berry, Duke Haddad, Trina Raudebush, and the External Grant Committee to review applications for our community grants, contact the Kiwanis office. We are looking for ideas for fourth quarter service projects. If you've got anything near and dear to your heart, please let us know. I'm going to turn it over to Trina, who will introduce today's speakers, Mr. Michael Kaltenmark, Evan Krauss, and Blue.
Thank you. I think last time we had a speaker with this large of an entourage, it was Henry Holcombs. So Butler Blue the Fourth, or Blue, as we call him, was born on October 30th, 2019 at Fall Creek Place Animal Clinic, delivered by Kurt Phillips, a Butler alumni from the class of '92. Blue is a male AKC registered English Bulldog. He sports a fawn and white coat, you can see under his little jersey, and he can be easily identified by the marking above his right eyebrow. The arrival of Butler Blue the Fourth also ushered in a new page in Butler Blue's live mascot program, as Blue will be under the care of handler Evan Krauss and his wife Kennedy, I'm sorry. Don't tell her I said that. Michael Kaltenmark, class of '02, and his wife Tiffany. I know you guys are so interchangeable. Relinquished the full-time handler duties after 16 years when Blue the Fourth received the color from Trip. Evan has trained under Michael and Blue the Third Trip for 6 years since he was a sophomore at Butler. Blue the Fourth was introduced to the world on January 22nd, 2020, and attended his first men's basketball game on Friday, January 24th, versus when the Bulldogs played Marquette. Blue's changing of the color ceremony took place February 29th of last year. While new to the game, Blue has proven mascot material and is honored and expected to represent Butler well. He has in his first season. So without further ado, I'm not going to stand between you and my favorite dog.
Thank you. I'm gonna grab these slide notes here.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for having us here today. Shout out to our colleague Graham Honecker for the invitation. He's in Washington, D.C. today and cannot join us. So, but still, nonetheless, appreciate him. Want to recognize him for inviting us here today and always being a good friend of the Live Mascot program. So, as mentioned, I'm Michael Kaltenmark, class of 2002 at Butler University, Director of External Relations. Evan and I both work in the University Marketing and Communications Division, where we do a host of things in addition to the Live Mascot program related to communications, PR, marketing, and then I also do community and government relations for the university, where I've been employed since graduating in 2002. So almost 20 years now, and for 16 of those, as was mentioned, I took care of Butler Blues the second and third before handing the leash off recently to Evan with Blue the Fourth. So that's a little bit about my background. Evan?
I'll give my own background.
Go ahead.
So I, like Trina said, I started working with Butler Blue the Third and Michael my sophomore year at Butler University. Learning quickly about the value of a live mascot program, or more I should say the potential value of a live mascot program that can touch more than just athletics for an hour and a half every Saturday and Thursday evening. So we decided to really expand the program once I graduated, and I was brought on full-time after I graduated from Butler University in 2016 to be the first in the country live mascot handler who is full-time position dedicated solely to the live mascot program. Fast forward a few years, I'm now a master's student in the College of Communications at Butler University in Strategic Communications, and now the handler at Butler Blue the Fourth. So we thought we'd give you just a little bit quick overview of the program, a little quick history, and some of the key initiatives that we use to bring Blue to the greater public and to bring awareness of not only Butler University but Indianapolis as a whole to a larger audience, thanks to these 4 paws right here. So how about you? You want to talk about your dogs and the founding of the program, and then I'll take it with mine.
Absolutely. So Butler has a long history. Bulldogs Institution was founded in 1855. They were known as the Christians until around 1919. Started adopting the bulldog as its mascot, and then made a formal change a few years later. Throughout the years, there was unofficial, official live mascots, so the likes of Butler's Bill or Butler's Mike or Butler's Sam. But these dogs were kept by fraternity men, so you can maybe use your imagination as to why that tradition may have went away. But nonetheless, in 2000, my former colleague Kelly Walker, a 91 graduate who worked in the alumni office, wrote up a proposal to start a formal live mascot program. And that's when we acquired Butler Blue the First. We had a naming contest, that's how the name became Blue. And the dog was introduced and we were off and running. I was an undergraduate at the time and really enamored with the idea of having a live mascot program, so much so that when I graduated I thought someday I'm going to get a bulldog, it's going to happen. I didn't know it would be the bulldog. Kelly, a few years later, announced that she was leaving the university, heading out west, and she made arrangements to take Blue the First with her. And so I think I put my hand up in a meeting and said, are we going to get another dog? Can I be the guy that takes care of it? And they said yes. And I ran with it. So I went and got Butler Blue the Second, and just went to work. And from there, it was sort of a, don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness later mentality. And I grew that thing into something I thought it could be for the university. And as I've often said, I wanted it to be the stature and prominence and that sort of thing of, say, Uga at Georgia or Handsome Dan at Yale. Only the problem was we didn't have big-time SEC football, and we didn't have Ivy League tradition. So I had to figure out a new path forward, and I put all my chips on basketball. And in the meantime, I tried to give the dog a bit of a voice and a presence. I made sure that dog was everywhere. If there were students having a bake sale outside of Atherton Union, by golly, that dog was going to be there. And so I took the dog everywhere just to make sure that people understood who he is and what he's about, and that Butler has a live mascot program. And then I started blogging for the dog, and then social media came about, and created social media accounts for the dog, and tried to channel his personality and voice, and not only give the dog a voice, but also give the institution a bit of a voice that's beyond the bricks and mortar. And it seemed to work, and it was working well. And then thanks to Brad Stevens and a handful of basketball players, we went to a couple Final Fours, and that really put us on the map, and we've sort of never looked back since. And after that, it was a matter of leveraging that new position within the national landscape to do what we do. And so we kept thinking of ways outside of a Final Four that we could put our dogs out in the public to be seen and heard, and so that way people would know more about Butler. So when Blue II retired, I signed on to take Blue III and just kept it going. And as Butler grew in stature and prominence, joining the Atlantic 10 from the Horizon League, and then eventually the Big East, that put us in new markets. And so I would take the dog to those markets and do our thing and sort of spread the Butler gospel, if you will. They've been an amazing marketing tool, certainly. So when you think of the mascot, I think you closely associate it with athletics, and then as well as marketing and PR, and there's certainly those things. But since that time of going to the Final Fours, we've also thought a little bit more strategically in terms of how we can insert them into other strategic operations of the university. So think student recruitment and student retention and development and giving and things like that. And so Evan will tell you a little bit about how we've done that with Blue III and now Blue IV, and how the program has continued to ride that sort of trajectory, which is, I'd say, a bit different than our counterparts across the country.
We won't call those counterparts out, but what we see Blue now as, besides a lovable personification of the Butler University brand, is he is what we characterize as a strategic university asset. Just as if our pharmacy program is an asset for the university, we see Blue and the opportunities and the potential opportunities around him as a strategic communications asset. So what that does is, basically, if you think about it, nobody's upset when they see a dog. So we kind of run with that in our head, and we use this to create a very, very robust brand within a brand, a sub-brand, if you will, of Blue underneath the Butler University brand as a whole. So this is adapted from the Butler University guidelines, so everything that Blue encompasses is from the Butler University guidelines, but we're able to pick and choose what he represents, how he represents it, in what manner, so that it connects with our audiences a lot better. So some of these things, we have these funnels of job opportunities that Blue has, these different things that he can represent for the university. The number one thing is a student recruiter. One of his biggest impacts is within the enrollment field. As a private institution, we rely heavily on tuition money for just our standard operating budget every year. And so student recruitment is very high up on the list at Butler of importance in the marketing department. And so we use Blue quite heavily to reach these target markets. Our target markets are getting younger and younger, anywhere from 13 to 17 years old, to convince a child to make this huge life decision. And Blue's there to make it a little easier for them and to bring a friendly face to the college decision-making process. Because I remember when I was 17 trying to figure out what schools I wanted to go to, I was very intimidated. And so we want Blue, have a dog, Blue to be able to represent what they're going to have at Butler. Because while that process can be intimidating, we know that your 4 or 6 years, if your pharmacy time at Butler, is going to be very special. So Blue is used as a voice and an anthropomized version of Butler University to these students. And it's a great foot in the door as well. Just like men's basketball is a foot in the door of the university to so many people, so can this dog. And the second is the cultural attaché, if you will. So we do have quite the robust art scene at Butler University with Clues Memorial Hall, the Schrock Center for the Arts, and a handful of other auditoriums, and bring in quite a large amount of shows. And so Blue is a proud supporter of the arts in that way. He's a business advisor. He is very business adept, but besides his own merchandise and marketing efforts, he does help support our Lacey School of Business on campus. He is a science and education evangelist, so you might know College of Education boasts a 100% placement rate, which is obviously tied for highest in the country. But he is very much on board with supporting those students who are looking to be educators in the future, as well as those in our liberal arts and sciences degrees and our College of Pharmacy and Sciences. Now you'll notice that I'm now on number 5 before I talk about athletics, and that really is one of the biggest things that separates our Live Mascot program from the likes of those you might know from SEC football, because we truly want Blue to be a full representation of what a Butler University student is. There could be a Butler University student who does not care too much for basketball, but they go to Butler University because of the Distinguished Pharmacy program and the education that they're going to get. And that is just as important to us at Butler as the student who is there and enjoying the dog pound when we play Villanova. And so that is what his role is as a university mascot. He is not just athletics, he is university. However, athletics is quite a big part, and so he is a very large athletic supporter. He attends all men's and women's basketball games at home, as well as football games, has a full pregame routine, and travels to quite a few games as well. So if you're a Butler fan, the Big East schedule dropped about an hour ago, so be on the lookout for, we'll be hitting the road here in a few months with Blue. And then lastly, he is just an all-around ambassador. We like to see him as the face of the university. It is pretty easy for everyone to look at Blue and be happy. So whenever there is something that is newsworthy for Butler University, he is there representing Butler. He is out in the community representing Butler and bringing warm feelings. When you see Blue, we want you to think warm feelings, so that when you see Butler University out in the world, you think warm feelings as well. And so that brings us to his schedule. So some of the ways that we do this, and we'll fly through this because we like to answer questions. That's more fun, and it's what you guys want to hear. So athletics, like I said, he attends all men's, women's basketball games, football games. He goes to about 2 or 3 every other sport. We have a handful of other sports as well between men's and women's soccer, track and field, cross country. And so we try to get to as many of those as possible. For enrollment, the biggest campaign that you might have seen is our Butler Bound campaign. And that is where we try to visit around 75 to 100 prospective students all across the country with the hand delivering of their acceptance letter from Blue. So we try, last year we had to adapt and do these on Zoom, but when we travel alongside the men's basketball team to Chicago, Milwaukee, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, we try to visit about 5 to 10 students in those areas who may only get a chance to visit Butler University once before they make their college decision. And we bring Butler to their doorstep with Blue. And like I said earlier, no one's mad about a dog. So we try to do a couple of those a year. And then Michael had the big dogs too, were kind of just thrown in your lap. And you really took that and ran with it. Do you want to speak on that?
Well, it was in my lap because it was my own idea, but that's what happens when you speak up in a meeting. You get a dog and then you get to go do things with the dog. But the Big Dogs Tour was born out of those conference transitions that I mentioned when Butler left the Horizon League, which is fairly Great Lakes based, enjoyed the Atlantic 10, and put us in some markets, some desirable markets that Butler sought to be in when it came to recruiting students and then also alumni engagement. And so being able to travel the Eastern Seaboard and compete was very attractive, and President Denko came into a marketing meeting one day and said, how are we going to take advantage of this as a university besides just playing competitive sports in those markets? And again, I put my hand up and said, what if I took at that point I had 2 dogs by myself. I had Blue the second and the third. And I said, what if I took the dogs on the road? And he said, tell me more. And I said, well, we'd take the dogs, we'd probably follow the men's basketball team, and then we would play tourists while we were there. So for instance, we went to Washington, D.C., where Graham is now. We would place the dog at the Lincoln Monument and the Washington Monument outside the White House and whatever famous restaurant is there, and take pictures and put them on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and put it all over the world in advance of the game. And I don't even know if we can get the dog in the game. I don't know that it matters. We just want to make a bunch of noise in that market. And so that's what I did, and it worked. And then the next year we joined the Big East, and they said, can you do it again? And I said, sure. And we went to more cities and did more of this and continued to do it until I said, I think the shtick's gonna wear off, guys. And that's when my boss, our VP of marketing at the time, came to me and said, what if we saw prospective students while we were on the road as well? And so that's how the Butler Bound initiative was born, and so that's what we did. We would surprise prospective students in those areas in addition to playing tourists and calling on alumni or elected officials or whomever was in that market. We would also call on prospective students and surprise them with their admittance letter or a scholarship note or what have you, and bring a little piece of Butler University to their front doorstep, which is really cool and something that we continue to this day. So yeah, these truly are the busiest dogs on the planet, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Well, perfect. Before we open it up for questions, I'll give you a moment to think of questions, and while you're thinking of them, I'm going to answer some of our frequently asked questions to kind of knock them out for you. So be thinking of really hard questions that we haven't heard before, because that would be super exciting for us. So like Michael touched on earlier, how did Butler Blue get their name? It was a campus-wide contest back in the year 2000 with plenty of other names on the list. Hampton, as Hampton is a prominent road, as well as Ovid. Ovid didn't stick as well as you can imagine. Is Butler Blue always a male bulldog? No, and we actually have probably the least strict guidelines of characteristics for a bulldog, in a way. Our dog can be any color, our dog can be male or female. We do not breed our dogs, which is something we take a very firm stance on. Overbreeding of bulldogs can cause a lot of issues down the line. We are always just looking for the healthiest bulldog we can at the time we need a bulldog. And that just so happened to be Blue when it was time for a trip to retire. What kind of dog is Blue? He is an English bulldog. You might be aware of French and American, but if you're thinking of a mascot such as Yale, Brownsburg High School, an English bulldog is what you are going to see, and that is actually the most popular sports mascot in the country, is an English bulldog. And then, how many other schools have live mascots? I like to throw this one in because it's fun. 57 other schools have live mascot programs, and they range anywhere from bison to longhorn steer, a blue tick hound down in University of Tennessee, and quite a few bulldogs. Of that 57, 60% of those are dogs, and of that 60% that are dogs, 60% are English bulldogs. All right, if you have a question, we would love to answer them. Yes, Art.
Question about the Butler Bound recruitment programs. I heard a couple of years ago there was a very high percentage of students that you give their admittance to eventually come to Butler because they would choose Butler over other schools that certainly Bulldog helps. And the question I had was a couple of things. One of which is when you go there, the student is surprised. Do the parents know about that? So you do arrange so that they're there. I always kind of wondered about them.
Yeah.
Posted in social media. The other question I had was, do you look at the students that you're going to visit in a strategic way and say, we really want this student, or we're concerned that they may go elsewhere?
Yep. So there's a lot that goes into it. The first time we did this, I think we had to beg our admissions office for a list of names. We were like, trust us, this is going to work. And they're like, I don't know. And I get it. I understand being territorial. That's what they do. That's not what we do. But we were insistent that they give us a list of names, and we'll go see them. And if it works, then they have to keep giving us lists. And if it doesn't work, then we'll back off. Well, it worked really well. As you mentioned, I did my master's thesis on this topic. But when Blue goes to visit a prospective student, they are 3 to 4 times more likely to come to Butler than if we had not. So it works, and I'm not convinced that the dog gets someone to come to Butler, but I think the dog definitely gets someone to think more about Butler, and that's what we need. And so, yeah, it's a logistical nightmare to do this. It's not for the faint of heart. Evan will spend several hours contacting parents in a given market when we're about to go to set up these visits, and then carry around a pretty thick itinerary to make sure that we hit our marks and get it done and see all the students. Names that are given to us are typically of high priority. For whatever reason, however admission ranks that, they're like, these are students that for some qualification or another, we think they'd be great fit for Butler, we really want them to come. And then from there, it gets real strategic. Evan and I just plot the addresses on a map and see who's close, who's close to our hotel, who lives close together. And so after admission gives us a list and we know those names are good and those are people they want, from there it's sort of like, well, what's not gonna send us from one end of the town to another during rush hour? Like, let's keep this within reason. And then from there, after we've mapped them, then Evan starts calling parents and asking if we can surprise their son or daughter. So that's typically how it goes.
The first year that I took over the full-time planning of the Butler Bound visits was the same year I got engaged, and it is very similar to planning an engagement every single time. It is you have to ask the parents, first of all. Secondly, you have to make sure the parents are okay with it. Then you have to get a time, a place, make sure they're going to be there, make sure they're dressed appropriately. It is quite the logistical nightmare, but it's worth it every single time.
So quick comment, I love that Blue also nurtures the prospective students' pets.
Yes.
There's outreach to them. The question, can you talk a little about the training of Blue? I really appreciate you letting us be witness to part of that on Facebook.
Here, 1 second.
Okay.
Let me touch on one thing she said before you get into the training. So in addition to seeing prospective students, Blue also sends mail to prospective students' pets. So when students apply to Butler, they get in, and if they get in, then they get access to a portal. And in the portal, they give us more information about themselves. We ask them a questionnaire. One of the things we ask them is about their pets. I think they just think it's for fun to break the ice, but they don't know we're strategically using that information, because then later in the year, Blue will send a letter to their dog or cat to say, don't worry, your human is safe with me. I'll be their pet while they're at Butler. And then also send them maybe a Butler bandana or something to that effect. So, and it's a letter from Blue addressed to the dog or cat at that household. And this took some convincing from admission to let us do this as well, but at the end of the day, what we're doing is marketing. And if you're doing marketing well, you're being disruptive and you're staying relevant in a way that's positive and reflects positively on your brand. And that's exactly what this is. There's no other institution that does this or probably has, the creative chops to do it. And so they let us do it and it works really well and people get it because they're pet people already. So of course they come home and talk to their dog or cat, just like our dog talks to their dog or cat. So it works. So that's what she was referring to. Now to the training.
We've learned a lot in 4 dogs. And so the first step is you need a well-behaved dog. And so we take the first steps that every new dog owner should and enroll them in dog training to help them become a very kind and what's called a polite pet is what they always go for. So that is your polite greetings, your sits, your stays, your, for lack of a better word, you're in charge, your dominance over that dog. And so we spent the first few months of Blue's life just focusing on that completely. One note I would say is it's definitely more about training the human than the dog. It's more about understanding where their head's at, and once you understand where their head's at, you can adapt what you need to fit to them better. And so once we have that mindset going for us, it's much easier to go for it. And you've seen a couple of things if you've been watching me with Blue here. I will point to my eyes, and when Blue's looking at my eyes, that's his check-in. So that's just him checking in with me to make sure, hey, we're still doing this, we're hanging out together right now. You're free just to do whatever you need to do. And he's a good boy. Every once in a while he gets a treat, but he's also like 2 now, so he should be getting that. And then from there, we expand from what we've learned from the past 3 dogs to our mascot training. So we start with dog training, and then we go to mascot training. And that starts when he was born. Literally the week he was born, we start doing things that would prepare him for a healthy life as a live mascot. So there's things that we expose these dogs to that we want them to be comfortable with early on. So loud noises, strangers meeting them, and that's part of the reason he was chosen was he was okay early on with all of this. So we created a playlist of music that he would hear at Hinkle Fieldhouse for a basketball game and blared it in the home, and he got used to that quickly. We would drop random things and make loud noises because that happens at basketball games. Players go flying into the stands randomly, and he needs to know that things happen, and that's okay. And then Lastly, the pregame routines has been definitely the most unique portion of his training. The fun story from there is early on when I had him, we noticed whenever he would hear the noise of my alarm, he would go crazy. If I were to set an alarm, the same sound that I use to wake up in the morning for, let's say, a timer in the kitchen, he would go crazy. And we finally deduced it to the fact that he loved his breakfast so much that when he knew that I woke up, he got breakfast. So we caught that quick enough that I changed my alarm sound to be the Butler War Song. And so early on in his life, he learned that the war song is equivalent to something exciting. So early on for him, it was, I get to eat when I hear the war song. Now it's, I get to go for a run, I get to go see basketball players, I get to have fun, I get to go around the court and be a big deal. And so from early on, he made that transition. And from there, we learned the bone runs and the leading of the team out. He has certain trigger words that I won't say, that the PA announcer says, that at the very end of the lineup, so our head coach's name is one of the last things. So if he hears that name, he knows that he's about to go for a run. So learning those triggers and words for him, and that way he knows it, where it's weird for us. You can train a dog to associate any word, any sound with anything, and that's the kind of tactic that we went from there. Quick hand, Nancy.
So is two questions. Is there a list of people who would like to take the next retired Butler Blue? And secondly, aren't you glad that you don't have a bison as? I just can't imagine traveling.
Do you mean to take on Butler Blue 5 as in the next?
Well, no, when he retired.
Oh, he's not leaving my side.
Oh.
Yeah, so we have an agreement.
But I'll make you a deal on Blue the Third, Nancy.
Oh, you won't. That is not endorsed by the Butler Love Asset Program. No, we, at the end of the day, our number one priority is always the health and safety of a dog. And for us, for Tripp, who worked for 8 years, it did not feel right to take him away from their family. It just never even was a thought. So he lives with him for better or for worse. And
He's a good dog.
He's a good dog. He's just spirited. And then, sorry, what was the second part of your question? Bison. Oh my goodness, that's my favorite. I'm obsessed with all the other live mascots. We actually do hold pretty regular meetings with all the other handlers. And Ralphie is absolutely the top of my list, but I'm very glad I do not have to deal with her.
We got to meet Ralphie a couple years
last
ago.
Ralphie, yeah.
And we got to see them. They demonstrated the run on the football field and how they, have all the harnesses and all those cowboys running that dog, which are students, but they get like a varsity letter. They work out. And then Ralphie is kept on a ranch that is secret. Like nobody knows what ranch and how far away from University of Colorado it is, but she's kept at a secret location. And anyway, it was fascinating. Much different than a domestic dog, I will say that. Yeah, Mary.
Are there any stadiums that you're unwelcome?
Certainly, yeah. Most,
Xavier University.
yeah, most times we take the dog on the road for these big dogs tours. Most institutions will not let us bring the dog. Creighton will. They're a good sport about it. You'd think Georgetown would, since they have their own dog and we do things together, but our dog isn't welcome there. I think it's pretty much all of them except for Creighton. And again, that's fine. That just makes more buzz and gets people more excited than if we were to be admitted. But the dog isn't really banned from anywhere. People think he's banned from the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament just doesn't allow live mascots to go until you make the Final Four, which is terrible because live mascots are pretty unique to college athletics. I think they should be there, but
Maybe not Ralphie.
sometimes they can't get out of their own way. Yeah, domesticated ones, of course. Every year, at least we try to every year, get the dog out to Madison Square Garden for the Big East tournament. They're really great about having the dog, and they're really welcoming. So we do that. We take advantage of that. The dog's been in the U.S. Capitol building. This dog's been my ticket to a lot of places, and it's pretty cool to see where they actually can get in. And it's like a walking credential. Like you don't even need any previous clearance. You just show up with a Butler Bulldog, and people are like, let's open this door and let's get you in here. So we're welcome in more places than we are, actually. But yeah, a lot of our peer institutions won't let us in to steal their show.
It is of note too. I think Butler's unique and we own our own basketball venue.
Yeah.
Georgetown plays in the Washington Wizards arena, so they do not have a lot of control of it, unfortunately.
So, you mentioned Uga earlier. It was on a tour of Savannah, and I think someone pointed out that those people are Uga people. Maybe they had Uga on their license plate. I don't know if they care for the dog or they get their dogs from them. But anyway, it looks like your blues come from
Two different breeders.
kennels. I mean, how do you decide? Like when it's like, okay, we got to start looking for the next one. How do you decide where it's coming from?
Yes, so for the first 3 bulldogs, they came from Kong King Kennels, who have since retired. And so that is why we ended up finding a new breeder. And we rely 100% on our veterinarian, Dr. Kurt Phillips, who is a Butler University grad. He went up to Purdue to get his degree in veterinarian sciences, and then has opened up 5 clinics, I believe, now in the greater Indianapolis area under the Cityway Animal Clinics, and is known in Indiana as the forefront leader of bulldog health. And he knows off the bat from a puppy, from even a mother and a father, what will make a great bulldog health-wise. And so when it came to time for choosing Blue, he identified Blue's litter based off of the parents of the litter, monitored Blue's mom, Violet, quite a bit throughout the process. And then once that litter was born, Blue has 2 sisters, then we really used a 4-person team approach of evaluating different aspects of the litter in terms of which would make a good mascot. So number 1 priority was Dr. Phillips. He did x-rays, blood work, he did scans, and he messed with them and tried to check out what would grow into a great bulldog. Bulldogs are prone to many health problems. And so as many as we can mitigate, I say as many as we can because every single one of our dogs has had different health issues. That's just what bulldogs do. And try to mitigate as much as those as possible. So one of Blue's sisters had a much more shrunken nose inwards than Blue and his other sister. And so just from a breathing standpoint, she was kind of taken off the plate early on. And then from there, physically, Blue and his sister Marshmallow, the all-white female you might see in posts, both of them were considered physically adept to be the next Butler Bulldog. And then it became me, Michael's, and then the breeder, Jody's decision. Jody, based on what she observed as the breeder with his behavior towards people and dogs, and then Michael and I for basically the least important things, such as branding aspects, what we think would be important, and then all 4 of us came together for what we think his socialization was like. And that ended up being the biggest deciding factor for Blue versus his sister Marshmallow. She was not a bag dog, that's the thing, but we did not think that she would want to be the mascot. She didn't love to hang out with people as much. She liked to play by herself. She wasn't very big on being held as a puppy, where Blue would eat it up all day. He would nestle in, he would go to people, and he was very well socialized with people. And so obviously that is a large portion of his role. And so that is why he was chosen. Tom.
I presume that he's housebroken. How do you avoid accidents?
Great question. Blue was potty trained in half of a day. Remarkably smart animals, English Bulldogs are. They're ranked number 3 by the AKC in terms of knowledge capabilities, but they're stubborn. So you need to make sure they're trained. So he was trained, and it is just, like I said earlier, our first instinct is always the well-being of the dog. And so that is regular potty breaks. If we're gonna be at the location for more than an hour, he's gonna have to take a break outside. Hinkle Fieldhouse, we probably go through 5 or 6 potty breaks during a basketball game. They consume a lot of water, they go through a lot. And luckily, the only accident that's ever happened on court has been from the front end, where you can look that story up for a later time because it's a very long story. But long story short, Butler III did vomit on the free throw line, basically, of Madison Square Garden.
The best thing he's ever done. I don't know, how's the old saying go? Life gives you vomit, you make lemonade, but it was perfect. It was perfect. Yeah.
Can you touch on the Netflix special?
Yeah, so if you didn't know, Evan and I and the dogs have an episode on Netflix for a docuseries called Dogs. And if you have Netflix, you can just look up Dogs and then go to season 2, episode 1, and you'll find us. And it's a cute little story, just less than an hour, about what we do in our lives and the dogs' lives. And so that came about because Dogs Series 1 came out, and it was fairly popular as a Netflix original, produced by a guy named Glidden Zipper in California. And not too long after it came out, he got on social media and said that they were planning a season 2 and that he's looking for stories. So we reached out and pitched ours, and they were interested. And so we got to talk to a handful of people that work for Glenn and the production company. And so we had to do sort of a first round screening to tell them more about our story and who we are and what we do. And then we had to do sort of a casting screening. So they had to, we had to get on another call with like a casting agent to really just to see if we had any sort of personality. And we must have passed that test because then they called us back and said that they wanted to do our episode. And so we filmed this during the 2019-2020 basketball season, and it was supposed to come out in the spring of 2020, but then COVID hit, and production got delayed. Our episode was basically done, but I believe there were supposed to be 6 episodes in season 2. There's only 4, so there was a lot of production issues with some of the other episodes, so it delayed things. But the show was released this past July, and so we had a little debut event on campus. But yeah, it's a really cute story about the Live Mascot program. We're really honored to be featured in it, and it's just sort of another feather in the cap of the Live Mascot program, you know, dating back to those final 4 days and how we've continued to leverage the program to do great things and bring attention to the university. You know, I think Netflix is a big deal, and Evan and I were patting ourselves on the back for being able to get our, you know, our Live Mascot program and our university on Netflix, even though we weren't quite sure what that would mean. And now that it's happened, we're kind of getting a better understanding of what it truly means when we get a lot of follower requests on social media and a lot of messages in email and on social media from people who are literally around the world. A lot of these messages we have to somehow translate because they're in Italian or Spanish or what have you. So I don't think we truly grasp the global reach that Netflix would give our program and more importantly, the university. And that's been really unique and really cool. And in fact, we have a student, a graduate student in Ecuador who's reached out because she wants to do her master's thesis on our Live Mascot program in university. So really interesting, but the global impact of that Netflix show has been remarkable, and we're just excited to see the possibilities that provides for Butler in the years ahead.
Mr. Trent, last question.
Yeah.
This program and a lot of what Butler does shows a level of creativity and kind of entrepreneurial spirit
Yeah.
that we usually associate with higher education. So
Yeah.
could you just speak about the culture of Butler?
So I'll say this. That's because there's a lot of people there who believed in me and now believe in Evan to just go and create and do the right thing. And as I mentioned, when I took over the program, I didn't ask for permission much. I just went and did, and if I needed to ask forgiveness, I would, but I typically didn't have to because the things we did would work, and it was unique, and it put Butler on the map. And so it's really just indicative of the people that are there around us who can see it, who can get behind it, and who are willing to let us do it. And it truly is an institution of really innovative people who are committed to the mission at hand in terms of educating students, but also who have an entrepreneurial spirit, who are willing to think beyond our traditional scope. And so you'll start seeing that more and more from Butler University. I think our traditional scope obviously is that 4-year undergraduate residential experience, and that's our bread and butter, and we'll still continue to do that. But the world around us is changing, especially in the form of education and higher ed. And so how do we make a Butler education more accessible, maybe to those who couldn't previously afford it or wouldn't think to be able to go there because of financial situations, Or maybe they're at a different point in life, and maybe they don't necessarily want to quit their job and go back to school, or even go part-time to get an MBA. Maybe they just need a couple credentials to level up in what they do. And so being able to provide more access and then also more offerings for a audience base that's outside of our traditional scope, that 18-year-old who wants a 4-year degree, that's what we're looking to do, and I think you'll see a lot more of that from the university in the years ahead.
Great, thanks guys. So thanks Michael and Evan and Blue for spending time with us today. We'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so
Blue,
much.
don't eat it.
Leave it.
A donation will be made in your name to 913 Sports. They serve 50,000 kids annually in the Indy area schools through an innovative youth cycling program that promotes fitness and builds self-esteem, just like you, Blue.
Very cool.
We will see you next week on Zoom. For Past President's Day, we had a number of our past presidents concerned about Delta variant, so we just decided to move next week to Zoom. For those of you who would like to take a photo with Blue, please form a line. Thank you for masking up. Mr. Bill. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to tell everybody that Michael is from God's country, Wabash County, India.
Hey, that's true.